I changed my entire will the day my son smiled when I told him I was dying and asked about his inheritance. For 40 years I'd given that boy everything of my time, my love, and over $300,000 for his education and business. But when I shared what I thought was a terminal diagnosis, his first words weren't "I love you, Dad," or "We'll fight this together." No. He smiled, actually smiled, and asked, "So, how much are you leaving me?" That's when I knew. That's when I realized I'd raised a stranger. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this has traveled. Because what I discovered next about my son and his wife was even worse than I could have imagined, and what I did in response, well, let's just say justice doesn't always need a courthouse. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this at 63. I was supposed to be enjoying retirement, watching my grandchildren grow, maybe playing a round of golf at my club in Nashville every Thursday morning. My late wife Margaret and I had built a beautiful life, a 4-bedroom home in Belle Meade with a garden she'd lovingly tended for decades. After losing her to cancer 5 years ago, my son James was all the family I had left. Or so I thought. I'd built Anderson Construction from nothing, just me and a pickup truck in 1985, growing it into one of the most respected commercial builders in Tennessee. When James showed interest in the business, I was ecstatic. I paid $180,000 for his business degree at Vanderbilt. I gave him a vice president position straight out of college with a 6-figure salary. I mentored him, introduced him to my network, and planned to hand over my life's work to him when I retired. Every Sunday, James, his wife Rebecca, and my 2 grandchildren would come over for dinner. I'd spend all day Saturday preparing Margaret's recipes, her famous pot roast with those little potatoes that the kids loved. I converted our old office into a playroom filled with $4,000 worth of toys and games. I never missed a recital or baseball game. I put $10,000 in each of their college funds every Christmas and birthday. When Rebecca mentioned they were outgrowing their starter home, I gave them $120,000 for the down payment on a beautiful house just 3 blocks from mine. Family should be close, I told them as I handed over the check. James hugged me tight that day. "You're the best father anyone could ask for," he said. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." As it turns out, he was already planning how he'd repay me. Just not in the way I thought. Before everything fell apart, I truly believed I had the perfect life for a widower. My morning started at 5:30 a.m., just as they had for 40 years of running my business. Old habits die hard. I'd make coffee in the kitchen Margaret had designed, with its cherry cabinets and granite countertops that she'd spent months selecting. The morning sun would stream through the east-facing windows, lighting up her collection of blue willow china that I couldn't bear to pack away. After Margaret passed, the house felt too quiet, too empty. That's why I treasured those Sunday family dinners. I'd spend $200 to $300 each week on groceries, preparing elaborate meals. The dining room would fill with laughter again as my grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, ages 8 and 6, told me about school and soccer practice. James would discuss business, and Rebecca would help serve and clean up, always complimenting my cooking. "You should have been a chef, William," she'd say, touching my shoulder affectionately. The company was thriving. We'd just secured a $4.5 million contract to build a new medical center. I was grooming James to take over, including him in all major decisions and client meetings. I paid him $225,000 annually, well above market rate for his experience level, because I wanted him to provide well for his family. When he suggested bringing Rebecca in to redesign our office space, she had a small interior design business, I happily agreed, paying her $45,000 for a project that would have cost half that with another designer. My life revolved around them. I babysat every Wednesday evening so they could have date night. I drove Emma to ballet lessons twice weekly when Rebecca said she was too busy with clients. I attended every parent-teacher conference alongside them, proud to be so involved in my grandchildren's lives. During the holidays, I spared no expense. Last Christmas, I'd spent over $5,000 on gifts for the family, including a diamond tennis bracelet for Rebecca and a Rolex for James, the same model I wore, because he'd always admired it. Like father, like son, I'd said as he opened it, my heart swelling with pride. I created college funds for each grandchild, already containing $85,000 each. I'd updated my will after Margaret died, leaving the house, valued at $1.2 million, my retirement accounts, $2.8 million, and the business, worth approximately $7.5 million, to James. Rebecca would receive Margaret's jewelry collection, appraised at $175,000. The grandchildren would each receive separate trusts of $500,000 that would mature when they turned 25. I thought I'd done everything right. I believed I was blessed with a loving family who appreciated me. I had no idea that behind their smiles and hugs, a very different reality was taking shape. No idea that when I wasn't around, they spoke of me very differently. No idea that in their eyes, I wasn't a beloved father and grandfather, I was just a bank account with an expiration date they were impatiently waiting for. Looking back, the signs were there, small red flags waving in the periphery of my vision that I willfully ignored. Love makes you blind, but it also makes you stupid. I was both. The first sign came last Thanksgiving. I was in the kitchen carving the turkey when I overheard James and Rebecca whispering in the hallway. Their voices were low, but I caught fragments, just need to wait it out. And another year or two at most. When I rounded the corner with the platter, they jumped apart like guilty teenagers. Rebecca's smile was too bright, too sudden. "Need any help, Dad?" James asked, voice slightly higher than normal. My instinct whispered that something wasn't right, but I silenced it with denial. They were probably discussing Christmas presents, I told myself. The second sign came when Emma, my precocious 8-year-old granddaughter, asked me an odd question during one of our baking sessions. "Grandpa," she said, rolling cookie dough with flour-covered hands, "are you going to live with us when you get too old?" Before I could answer, Rebecca appeared as if summoned, her face flushed. "Emma." "That's rude," she scolded, shooting me an apologetic look. "Your grandfather is perfectly healthy." Later, I overheard her telling Emma, "We don't talk about those plans outside our house, remember?" What plans? The third sign was financial. During a quarterly business review, I noticed unusual expenses, consulting fees to a company called LRB Associates totaling $45,000 over 6 months. When I questioned James, he became defensive. "It's for specialized market analysis. I told you about this." He hadn't. When I asked to see the reports, he said they were still preliminary. "Don't you trust me?" he asked, looking wounded. I backed down, ashamed for doubting him. The fourth sign was perhaps the most telling. James began excluding me from client meetings, saying they preferred younger energy. Contracts I should have reviewed were signed without my input. When I visited the office unexpectedly one Tuesday, I found my secretary, Louise, who had been with me for 20 years, cleaning out her desk, tears in her eyes. "James said the company is going in a different direction," she explained. He'd replaced her with a young woman named Megan who called me Mr. and seemed uncomfortable making eye contact. The fifth sign came during a Sunday dinner when Rebecca received a text that made her exclaim out loud. She showed it to James, whose eyes widened before he quickly composed himself. "Just how stuff," he muttered when I inquired. But that night, after they left, I found a real estate brochure they'd forgotten on my coffee table for luxury condominiums in Florida. "Your retirement paradise awaits," the cover proclaimed. Inside, someone had circled a $1.8 million penthouse unit and written "perfect" in the margin. Most damning was my grandson Tyler's innocent comment as James hustled them out the door. "Dad, is this where we'll live when Grandpa?" James cut him off with a sharp "Tyler. Car. Now." The cold look he gave his son sent a chill through me. My heart knew something was wrong, but my mind created excuses. They were stressed. I was being paranoid. Family doesn't betray family. But my instincts were screaming now, a warning siren I could no longer ignore. Something wasn't right in my perfect world. I just didn't know how wrong it truly was. It was a Wednesday, March 18th. The day my world imploded started ordinarily enough. I had a routine physical scheduled, nothing serious, just the annual checkup my late wife Margaret had always insisted upon. Prevention is better than cure, William, she'd say, and even 5 years after her passing, I honored her wishes. Dr. Patterson, who'd been my physician for over 20 years, found some concerning results in my blood work. "Your liver enzymes are elevated, William," he said, frowning at the chart. "I'd like to run some additional tests." His tone was measured, professional, but there was an undercurrent of concern that made my stomach clench. 3 days and several tests later, I sat in his office as he delivered the news. "There's a mass on your liver," he explained. "We won't know if it's malignant until we do a biopsy, but given the size and your symptoms, I think we should prepare for the possibility." Cancer. The word hung in the air, unspoken but deafening. I drove home in a daze, the Nashville spring sunshine seeming obscenely cheerful. My mind raced with practical matters, treatment options, finances, business arrangements. But beneath it all was a profound sense of mortality that made me long for family. For connection. I called James immediately. "Son," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "can you come over tonight? There's something important I need to discuss with you. Just you, not Rebecca and the kids." He agreed, sounding concerned, and arrived at 7:42 p.m. We sat in my study, the room where I taught him to tie his first tie, where I'd celebrated his college acceptance with expensive scotch, where Margaret and I had shown him the ropes of the business. I poured us each 2 fingers of Macallan 18, Margaret's favorite for serious conversations, and told him everything. "The doctors don't know for certain yet," I finished, "but they're concerned. I wanted you to know first, before anyone else." I expected shock. Grief. Perhaps the same fierce determination Margaret had shown during her illness, the insistence that we'd fight together, beat the odds. Instead, James took a long sip of his scotch, set down the crystal tumbler with deliberate care, and looked directly at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something calculated flickered across his face before it settled into what I now realize was a practiced look of concern. "How long?" he asked. "They're not sure. If it's what they suspect, maybe a year. Maybe less." He nodded slowly, then leaned forward. "And the will, everything's still the same, right? The business, the house? We should make sure everything's in order." The question hung between us like a physical thing. Not "how can I help you, Dad?" Not "what treatments are we looking at?" but "what will I get when you die?" My heart didn't just break in that moment. It shattered into dust. I managed to respond somehow, mumbling something about everything being arranged. But inside, something fundamental shifted. In that single instant, with those few words, my son became a stranger to me. But the true devastation came when I walked him to the door 40 minutes later. He made a call as he stepped onto the porch, thinking I'd already closed the door. "Babe," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still evening air, "it's happening. Dad's got liver cancer. A year, tops. Start calling the real estate agent tomorrow. And tell your brother we need to speed up the paperwork." There was a pause, then a chuckle that turned my blood to ice. "I know, finally, right? Love you too." I stood frozen, my hand still on the doorknob, as his car pulled out of the driveway. The magnitude of the betrayal was so enormous I couldn't process it. This wasn't just about money. This was my son, my only child, celebrating my death sentence. Planning for it. Waiting for it. The grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from my father, chimed 9 times. Each resonant tone seemed to say, nothing will ever be the same again. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Margaret's garden under a blanket of stars, drinking her favorite tea from her favorite mug, and made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't confront James, not yet. If my son and daughter-in-law had been waiting for my death, plotting behind my back, then I deserved to know exactly what I was dealing with. The full scope of their betrayal. I hope you're watching, Maggie, I whispered to the night air. Because I'm about to make you proud. The next morning, I called Dr. Patterson and requested absolute confidentiality regarding my medical information. No one calls about my condition. Not even family, I insisted. He agreed, sounding concerned but respecting my wishes. Then I began my investigation. First, I hired Carlton Michaels, a private investigator who'd helped with background checks for high-level employees at my company. I need everything, I told him, writing a check for $15,000. Phone records, financial movements, recorded conversations if legal, social media, emails. My son, his wife, and anyone they're conspiring with. Carlton didn't ask questions, just nodded and promised results within 2 weeks. Second, I contacted my old friend Edward Simmons, a forensic accountant who'd retired 3 years earlier. As a personal favor, I said over lunch at the Hermitage Hotel, careful to choose somewhere James and Rebecca never frequented. I slid him a USB drive containing company files. I need to know if money's going places it shouldn't. Edward's eyes sharpened. He knew what I was asking without me having to spell it out. Third, I installed security cameras throughout my home, using a security company from the next county over. Hidden devices in the study, living room, kitchen, and hallways. Privacy concerns, I explained vaguely to the technician who asked why I wanted the cameras concealed. If James and Rebecca had keys to my house, I needed to know if they were using them when I wasn't home. Fourth, I retrieved all my financial and legal documents from my home safe and made copies, storing the originals in a new safety deposit box at a bank James didn't know I used. I changed the passcodes on my personal accounts and created new email addresses for sensitive communications. Fifth, I called my attorney, Victoria Blackwell, a sharp-minded woman in her 50s who'd handled my affairs for decades. I need to discuss some changes, I said cryptically. And I need absolute discretion. We arranged to meet at her home on Sunday, when James would think I was at church. The evidence began trickling in by day 4. Carlton sent me photographs of James and Rebecca having lunch with a man I recognized as Leonard Kincaid, a business competitor who'd been trying to buy Anderson Construction for years. The timestamps showed it was during business hours on a Tuesday when James had told me he was at a client meeting. By the end of the first week, Edward called me sounding grim. "William, we need to talk in person. Today." His voice was tight with controlled anger. That afternoon, he showed me financial records revealing that over $350,000 had been diverted from the business into a shell company named LRB Associates, the mysterious consulting firm James had defended. LRB, Edward pointed out, stood for Leisure and Retirement Benefits. The company was registered to Rebecca's brother, an attorney I'd met only twice. The home security cameras yielded their own harvest of horrors. While I was at a doctor's appointment, James and Rebecca entered my house, went straight to my study, and spent 47 minutes going through my papers. "He's got to have updated medical information somewhere," Rebecca said clearly on the recording. "Keep looking." Later, she called someone, "Mom, we're in his house now. No paperwork yet, but he's definitely sick." James said he looked terrible. I'm thinking 6 months, not a year. The most damning evidence came on day 10. Carlton obtained a recording of a phone call between James and Leonard Kincaid. "Once the old man's gone, we'll close the deal immediately," James said. "The employees won't know what hit them. We can liquidate the equipment and real estate within 3 months." My son was planning to sell my company, the business I'd built from nothing, that employed 37 people who trusted me, and dismantle it for parts. He was planning to erase my life's work the moment I was in the ground. Each night, I returned home and acted normal during Sunday dinners, smiling at my son while cataloging his lies. When he asked about my health, I became a better actor than he ever was. "The doctors are still running tests," I'd say vaguely. "We'll know more soon." And all the while, I was building my case, piece by devastating piece. After 3 weeks of investigation, I knew everything. While they waited for me to die, I planned their downfall. By mid-April, I had amassed enough evidence to destroy James and Rebecca 10 times over. But destruction wasn't my goal. Justice was. And justice, properly served, required perfect timing, the right stage, and witnesses who mattered. I sat at Margaret's vanity, something I'd done often since her passing when I needed to think clearly. Her perfume bottles still lined the marble top, untouched since her death. "What would you do, Maggie?" I whispered to her ghost. The answer came to me with such clarity, I could almost hear her voice. "Make it count, William. Make it something they'll never forget." The perfect stage presented itself when Rebecca texted me about James's upcoming 40th birthday. "We're planning a surprise party at the Riverwood Country Club on May 15th, she wrote. "Black tie. We've invited 150 people, all the important clients, city officials, everyone who matters in Nashville. It's going to be spectacular." I smiled at my phone. Indeed it would be. The venue couldn't have been more perfect, the grand ballroom at Riverwood, with its crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Cumberland River. The guest list was even better. Everyone who mattered to James professionally would witness what was coming. I began my preparations methodically, like planning a complex construction project. First, I met with Victoria to completely rewrite my will. The new document left 75% of my estate to a trust that would maintain jobs at Anderson Construction, with the remaining 25% divided between 2 separate trusts for my grandchildren that James and Rebecca couldn't touch. The business would be run by a board that included my 3 most loyal executives. The house would be sold, with proceeds going to a cancer research foundation established in Margaret's name. "Are you certain about this, William?" Victoria asked, her eyes searching mine. "More certain than I've ever been about anything," I replied. She nodded and had the documents prepared within 48 hours. Next, I contacted Detective Sarah Anderson, no relation, at the Nashville Financial Crimes Division. We'd worked together years ago when a subcontractor had been skimming materials from job sites. Over coffee at a small cafe 30 miles outside Nashville, I laid out the evidence of embezzlement. "I'll need time to build a case," she said, reviewing the documents. "How long do you need?" I asked. "A month would be ideal," she replied. "You'll have it," I promised. I hired Meredith Chen, a brilliant young IT specialist, to prepare a digital presentation. "I need a completely secure system," I explained. "One that can't be shut down or interrupted once it starts playing." She created a special setup with backup generators and 3 redundant systems. "Once you push this button," she demonstrated, "nothing short of a power grid failure will stop it." I contacted Pastor Roberts at First Presbyterian, where Margaret and I had been members for 30 years, and where James had been baptized. The pastor had officiated at Margaret's funeral. I shared everything with him, under the seal of pastoral confidentiality. "I don't seek vengeance," I told him truthfully. "I seek justice and redemption for my grandchildren." After a long silence, he agreed to attend the party. For the final piece, I reached out to my oldest friend, Judge Michael Harrington. We'd known each other since law school, though I'd left to start my business while he pursued his legal career. Now he sat on the circuit court bench. Our conversation was careful, ethical, no promises of specific actions, just an understanding that he would witness what occurred. 3 days before the party, I visited Dr. Patterson for my follow-up appointment. The biopsy results had come back. I sat calmly as he delivered the news, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. That evening, I went to my workshop and opened the leather-bound journal Margaret had given me on our last anniversary. On the first blank page, I began writing letters to my grandchildren, one to be given to them immediately, explaining in simple terms what was happening to their parents, and others to be given to them when they turned 18, 21, and 25. They deserved to know the truth, but also to know how much their grandfather had loved them. As I sealed each envelope, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The plan was set. The stage was prepared. In just 72 hours, James would have his spectacular 40th birthday party. But it wouldn't be the celebration he expected. While he slept peacefully, anticipating his moment of glory, I planned his end. May 15th arrived with perfect spring weather. The ballroom at Riverwood Country Club was transformed into an elegant space with black and gold decorations, James's favorite color scheme. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandeliers, and the string quartet played softly in the corner. Outside, the sun was setting over the Cumberland River, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, nature's last glorious display before darkness fell. I arrived early, at 6:15 p.m., telling the event staff I wanted to check on some surprise elements for my son. Meredith had already set up her equipment in the small control room adjacent to the stage. "Everything's ready, Mr. Anderson," she confirmed, showing me the simple remote trigger in my pocket. "Just press it when you're ready." By 7:30 p.m., the room was filling with Nashville's business elite. The mayor and his wife arrived, as did 3 state senators. Contractors, suppliers, bankers, and clients mingled, sipping champagne and admiring the opulent setting. At precisely 8 p.m., Rebecca texted me, "We're 5 minutes out. Get everyone ready." The guests gathered, lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd as James entered to a chorus of surprise. His face registered genuine shock, then pleasure as he surveyed the room full of influential people, all there ostensibly to celebrate him. Rebecca stood beside him in a designer gown that had probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments, beaming with pride. For the next hour, I played my role perfectly. The proud father, slightly frail perhaps, but delighted by his son's success and popularity. I laughed at the right moments, raised my glass in toasts, and accepted condolences from those who'd heard rumors about my health. "You're in our prayers, William," they'd murmur, and I'd thank them with appropriately subdued gratitude. At 9:17 p.m., the moment arrived. The MC announced it was time for speeches, and James took the stage to enthusiastic applause. He spoke about his journey, his vision for the future, and his gratitude to those who had supported him, notably omitting any meaningful mention of me beyond a cursory "and thanks, Dad, for getting me started." When he finished, the MC called me up. "And now, a few words from the man who started it all, William Anderson." The room applauded politely as I made my way to the stage. James's smile was confident as he handed me the microphone, kissing my cheek for the benefit of the cameras. "Love you, Dad," he said, loudly enough to be heard by those nearby. I looked out at the sea of faces. At Rebecca, smugly adjusting her diamond bracelet. At business associates who respected me. At Pastor Roberts, standing solemnly at the back of the room. At Detective Anderson, who had positioned herself near one of the exits. At Judge Harrington, his eyes meeting mine with a slight nod. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "It's wonderful to see so many faces here to celebrate James's birthday. Family is everything to me. It has been since I started Anderson Construction nearly 40 years ago. I paused, taking a sip of water. James shifted slightly, perhaps sensing something in my tone. When my beloved Margaret was diagnosed with cancer 6 years ago, she told me something I've never forgotten. She said, "William, the true measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, but what you stand for when it matters most." Tonight, I want to stand for truth. I pressed a button in my pocket. Behind me, the massive screen that had been showing family photos flickered, then displayed a new image, James and Leonard Kincaid shaking hands outside Kincaid's office. 3 weeks ago, I received what I believed was a terminal diagnosis. I continued as gasps rippled through the crowd. I shared this devastating news with only one person, my son James. The screen changed to show a split screen, my medical records on one side, phone records on the other. Within 40 minutes of learning I might be dying, James made 6 phone calls. Not to doctors. Not to family friends for support. But to real estate agents, business competitors, and attorneys specializing in corporate liquidation. The screen changed again, showing bank statements with highlighted transfers. Over the past year, over $350,000 has been embezzled from Anderson Construction through a shell company called LRB Associates, which stands for Leisure and Retirement Benefits. This company is registered to Thomas Bryant, Rebecca's brother. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. James's face had drained of color. Rebecca was frantically whispering to someone beside her. But perhaps most telling is this conversation, recorded legally between my son and Leonard Kincaid, discussing the dismantling of my company and the termination of 37 loyal employees immediately following my anticipated death. The audio played clearly through the ballroom speakers. James's voice, unambiguous, "Once the old man's gone, we'll close the deal immediately. We can liquidate the equipment and real estate within 3 months." Silence fell. Complete, devastating silence. "You think I was an idiot?" I asked quietly, looking directly at my son. "For 40 years I built something that mattered, that supported families, that created value. And you couldn't wait for me to die before planning to destroy it." James lunged for the microphone. "Dad, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut him off. "But I'm not just here to talk. I'm here to act." I nodded to Detective Anderson, who approached the stage with 2 uniformed officers. "James Anderson, Rebecca Anderson, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy." The officers moved forward as chaos erupted in the ballroom. "You can't do this." Rebecca screamed as the officers approached. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said, my voice amplified across the stunned room. "For 37 years, I gave you everything, James. And you gave me nothing but lies. Now everyone here knows exactly who you are." As they were being led away, James looked back at me, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. "Why," he shouted over the murmuring crowd. "Why would you do this to your own son?" I stepped forward, making sure everyone could hear my response, because sometimes loving someone means holding them accountable. And because Emma and Tyler deserve better than to be raised by thieves. The officers led them through the stunned crowd, past clients and colleagues whose respect James had courted for years. Past the mayor, shaking his head in disappointment. Past Judge Harrington, whose stern expression promised no leniency in the courtroom to come. And as the doors closed behind them, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound sense of having done what needed to be done. The room erupted in shocked conversations as I quietly made my way off the stage, nodding to the security personnel I'd hired to ensure the evidence was preserved and protected. The legal machinery moved with surprising speed once the wheels were set in motion. Within 48 hours of the birthday party, James and Rebecca were formally charged with 6 felony counts each: embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, forgery. They had signed my name on several documents, and tax evasion. Judge Harrington, while recusing himself from the actual case due to our friendship, ensured it was assigned to Judge Patricia Watkins, known for her no-nonsense approach to white-collar crime. The financial consequences were immediate and severe. The court froze all of James and Rebecca's personal accounts, their investment portfolios, and even placed a lien on their house, the very house I had helped them buy. Their credit cards were canceled, their Range Rover and Mercedes repossessed. Within a week, they had gone from Nashville's golden couple to financial pariahs. 3 days after the arrests, Thomas Bryant, Rebecca's brother and the registered agent for LRB Associates, was brought in for questioning. Facing potential disbarment and criminal charges himself, he quickly turned state's evidence, providing prosecutors with detailed records of the entire scheme. It was Rebecca's idea initially, he admitted in a statement that was leaked to the Nashville Business Journal. She said William wouldn't live forever, and they deserved to enjoy the money now. The professional fallout was equally devastating. The Nashville Business Association, where James had recently been elected to the board, publicly rescinded his membership. Clients began canceling contracts with Anderson Construction, concerned about the company's stability. I called an emergency meeting with our top 20 clients, personally assuring them that the company was financially sound and would continue operating under new management. Most stayed, but the damage to our reputation required months of careful repair work. Rebecca's interior design business collapsed overnight. Her society clients, many of whom had been at the birthday party, canceled projects and demanded refunds. Her Instagram business account, once filled with glowing comments about her exquisite taste, now featured nothing but scathing remarks about her character. Perhaps the most painful consequence for them involved my grandchildren. Given the serious nature of the charges and the substantial evidence, the family court granted temporary custody to Margaret's sister, Elizabeth, who lived just outside Nashville. The judge determined that James and Rebecca posed a flight risk and ordered supervised visitation only. The children moved into Elizabeth's comfortable farmhouse, where they had often spent summer weeks while Margaret was still alive. Emma and Tyler were understandably confused and frightened by the sudden changes. I visited them daily, trying to explain in age-appropriate terms what had happened. "Your mommy and daddy made some very bad choices," I told them gently. "They took things that didn't belong to them, and now they have to face the consequences. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and you are loved very, very much." The criminal case proceeded rapidly. Faced with overwhelming evidence, James and Rebecca's attorneys advised them to consider a plea deal. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Monica Sanchez, offered terms: guilty pleas to 2 felony counts each, with the other charges dropped, in exchange for full restitution, cooperation in ongoing investigations into Leonard Kincaid's business practices, and reduced prison sentences of 3 to 5 years. James accepted immediately. Rebecca initially refused, insisting on her innocence despite the mountain of evidence. After 2 weeks of watching her carefully crafted social image crumble, she finally relented and accepted the same terms. On July 22, exactly 68 days after the birthday party revelation, I sat in the courtroom as they entered their guilty pleas. James wore an orange jumpsuit instead of his usual bespoke suits. Rebecca's designer clothes had been replaced by standard-issue prison attire, her carefully highlighted hair now showing dark roots. Neither would look at me. Judge Watkins was unsparing in her sentencing remarks. "The court is particularly troubled by the calculated nature of these crimes, perpetrated against a family member who had shown nothing but generosity toward the defendants. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, you have not just broken the law, you have broken a sacred trust. This court sentences you each to 4 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 3 years, plus full restitution of $350,000 to Anderson Construction." As they were led away in handcuffs, Rebecca finally turned to look at me, her face a mask of hatred. James kept his eyes fixed on the floor, shoulders slumped in defeat. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, thrusting microphones toward me. "Mr. Anderson, how do you feel about the sentencing?" one asked. I paused, considering my words carefully. "There is no victory here today," I responded quietly. "Only justice, and the painful reminder that character matters more than success, integrity more than ambition. My focus now is on rebuilding both my company and my grandchildren's sense of security." That evening, I received an unexpected call from Leonard Kincaid. "William," he began awkwardly, "I want you to know I never intended." I cut him off. "Save it for your own trial, Leonard. Detective Anderson tells me they'll be bringing charges against you next week." The silence on the line was profound before he disconnected. Within 3 days, his company announced he was taking an indefinite leave of absence for personal reasons. By year's end, Kincaid Construction would file for bankruptcy. The most poignant consequence came in a letter I received from James 2 months into his sentence. Just 3 lines, written in the shaky handwriting of a broken man. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I am sorry." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in Margaret's jewelry box. Perhaps someday I would find it in my heart to respond. But not yet. Not yet. The first months after James and Rebecca went to prison were the hardest. Each morning, I'd wake up reaching for the phone to call my son about some business matter, only to remember all that had happened. The house echoed with emptiness. I'd wander from room to room, looking at family photographs that now felt like artifacts from a fictional past. The woman I was died. Someone new was born, Margaret had said after her diagnosis. Now I understood what she meant. The man I had been, trusting, perhaps naive, was gone. But gradually, something new began to emerge from the ashes of betrayal. It started with the grandchildren. Emma and Tyler visited every weekend, filling the house with noise and life again. At first, their visits were tentative, confused. "Why is Daddy in jail?" Tyler asked one Saturday as we built Lego towers on the living room floor. I answered with simple honesty, the way Margaret would have wanted. "He took money that wasn't his, and now he has to face the consequences of that choice. But it doesn't change how much I love you." By midsummer, they were staying overnight. Emma helped me plant a butterfly garden in the backyard. "Grandma would like these flowers," she said, pressing purple coneflower seeds into the rich Tennessee soil. Yes, I agreed. She always loved things that attracted butterflies. Something healed in me as I watched tiny green shoots emerge weeks later. The business required rebuilding too. I returned to active management, working closely with the 3 executives I'd selected as future board members. We instituted new financial controls, transparent reporting systems, and a company-wide ethics program. I personally visited each job site, shaking hands with carpenters and electricians who'd been with me for decades. "We're going to be okay," I assured them. "Better than okay. We're going to be the kind of company that stands for something." By October, we'd secured 2 major new contracts, including the library expansion project we'd lost when news of the scandal first broke. Clients were returning, employees were holding their heads high again, and Anderson Construction was slowly rebuilding its reputation for integrity. I sold the Bellmead house in September. Too many memories, too much space for one person. I found a modern 3-bedroom condo overlooking Centennial Park, with floor-to-ceiling windows that filled the space with light. No more ghosts, no more echoes. I donated most of the furniture to a women's shelter, keeping only Margaret's reading chair, our wedding album, and a few family heirlooms for the grandchildren. With the proceeds from the house sale, I established the Margaret Anderson Memorial Scholarship for children who had lost parents to cancer. The first recipients, 5 Nashville high school seniors, came to dinner at my new place in November. Listening to their dreams and plans reminded me that life continues, that good things can emerge from pain. In December, I joined a hiking group for seniors. Our first outing was the Mossy Ridge Trail at Percy Warner Park, an easy 4-mile loop through winter woods. I'd never been much of an outdoorsman, too busy building my company to take time for recreation. Now, at 63, I discovered the quiet pleasure of walking among ancient trees, a physical exertion that cleared the mind. Each day I woke up stronger, I told Pastor Roberts during one of our regular coffee meetings. He'd been a steadfast support through everything. I'm learning that resilience isn't about never falling down. It's about how you get back up. Perhaps the most unexpected part of my transformation came through Elizabeth, Margaret's sister. After 6 months of coordinating grandchildren visits and family dinners, our relationship evolved from in-laws to friends. She understood loss, having been widowed herself years earlier. We shared memories of Margaret, laughed at the same jokes, appreciated the same music. When she suggested we attend the Nashville Symphony's holiday concert together, it felt natural to say yes. Margaret would approve, you know, Elizabeth said as we walked back to the car after Beethoven's night. She always worried about you being alone. I'm not looking to replace her, I replied honestly. Elizabeth's smile was gentle. No one could. That's not what moving forward means. By the 1-year mark after the birthday party revelations, my life had taken shape in ways I couldn't have imagined. I worked 3 days a week at the company, mentoring the next generation of leadership. I volunteered twice monthly at the cancer center where Margaret had received treatment. I had dinner with Elizabeth most Fridays. The grandchildren spent every other weekend with me, and we were planning a summer trip to the Smoky Mountains. I learned that kindness isn't weakness, it's courage. I learned to set boundaries, to trust judiciously rather than blindly. I learned that I deserve respect, and so do others. Most importantly, I learned that while betrayal can break you, healing is a choice you make every single day. The old William Anderson, who defined himself through his business and his role as father and provider, was gone. In his place stood someone more complex, more compassionate, more complete. A man who had weathered the worst storm of his life and emerged not unscathed, but undefeated. As Margaret had written in her final journal entry, which I discovered only after her death, the truest measure of strength isn't never falling. It's rising every time you fall. A year after my world collapsed, I stood firmly on my feet, facing forward, finally understanding what she meant. It's been exactly 2 years since that fateful birthday party at Riverwood Country Club. Nashville springtime is in full bloom again, dogwoods and redbuds painting the hills with white and purple. Life has a way of continuing, regardless of the storms we weather. James and Rebecca served their sentences without incident. James was released on parole 3 months ago, having served just over half his sentence due to good behavior and cooperation with authorities. Rebecca remains at the Tennessee Women's Correctional Facility for another 7 months. They divorced while in prison, a development that surprised no one who knew the true nature of their relationship. They lost everything. The beautiful house was sold at auction to cover legal fees and restitution payments. Their social standing in Nashville was irreparably damaged. Leonard Kincaid received a 6-year sentence for his role in the conspiracy and numerous other financial crimes uncovered during the investigation. His company was dissolved, its assets liquidated to repay creditors and defrauded clients. James now works as a night manager at a hotel near the airport, one of the few places willing to hire someone with his record. He lives in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. We meet once a month for coffee, these encounters still strained but gradually thawing. He's humbler now, the entitled arrogance replaced by a quiet acceptance of his circumstances. I never understood what you built until I lost it all, he told me during our last meeting. I thought success was about accumulation, money, status, possessions. I was wrong. I didn't disagree. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Rebecca has not attempted to contact me. According to James, she blames me entirely for her circumstances, unable to accept responsibility for her own choices. Her brother Thomas was disbarred but avoided prison by providing state's evidence. He now works in construction in another state, his law career permanently ended. As for me, I found an unexpected third act in my life story. Anderson Construction continues to thrive under the leadership team I established. I serve as chairman emeritus, offering guidance when asked but no longer involved in day-to-day operations. The company recently completed its largest project to date, a new children's wing at Vanderbilt Hospital, dedicated to Margaret's memory. Emma and Tyler, now 10 and 8, split their time between Elizabeth's home and mine when they're not with their father during his visitation weekends. They're resilient children, adapting to their new reality with a flexibility that sometimes astonishes me. We have honest, age-appropriate conversations about what happened and why, emphasizing that people can make terrible mistakes yet still be worthy of love and second chances. Elizabeth and I were married in a small ceremony last fall. It wasn't a romance born of passion, but something deeper, mutual respect, shared values, and the comfort of companionship. Margaret would indeed have approved. Take care of each other, she'd often said to us both during her final months. In finding each other, we've honored her wish. The Margaret Anderson Memorial Scholarship now supports 12 students annually. I've added a second charitable initiative, the Second Chance Foundation, providing job training and placement for former inmates attempting to rebuild their lives. Some might find it ironic, given what James did. I see it as the most fitting response to his betrayal, creating opportunity from adversity, redemption from failure. My diagnosis, the catalyst for all that followed, turned out to be incorrect. The mass on my liver was benign, requiring only minor surgery for removal. The doctor who called with this news expected jubilation. Instead, I felt a strange mixture of relief and reflection. That false diagnosis had revealed the truth of my relationships more effectively than decades of normal interaction ever could. If there's a moral to this story, perhaps it's this: the true measure of our character isn't found during comfortable times, but in how we respond when faced with betrayal, disappointment, and loss. Do we become bitter or better? Do we seek vengeance or justice? Do we collapse or rebuild? I chose to rebuild, not just structures of wood and steel, but the more important foundations of family, integrity, and purpose. I learned that while we cannot control the actions of others, we always retain control over our response to those actions. We always have the power to choose our next step, even when the ground beneath us seems to have disappeared. For those of you listening who might be facing your own moment of betrayal or loss, know that you're not alone. The path forward exists, even when you can't yet see it. Trust that with time, with courage, and with the support of those who truly love you, healing is possible. If my story has resonated with you, please like and subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear that surviving betrayal is possible. Type strength in the comments if you've ever had to rebuild after someone let you down. James asked me recently if I've forgiven him. I told him the truth: forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. Some days I feel it completely, other days it eludes me. But I'm walking in that direction, one step at a time. Not for his sake, but for my own. Because I've learned that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. The final chapter of this story isn't about what they lost, but what I found: the knowledge that we are all more resilient than we know until resilience is demanded of us. The understanding that endings often make space for unexpected beginnings. And the quiet certainty that while betrayal can break your heart, it doesn't have to break your spirit. Life continues. We adapt. We grow. We rebuild. And sometimes, if we're fortunate, we find ourselves standing in a place we never could have imagined, not despite our hardest experiences, but because of them.